Pro-life talk. Real world answers. This is Life Report.
Welcome to Life Report. I am Josh Brom. No Liz, no Andrew today. We have two special guests, Eric Scheidler and Matt Yonke from the Pro-Life Action League. Welcome to the show, guys.
Hi.
Thanks, Josh. Let me introduce these guys real quick, and then we're going to get going into content. Eric Scheidler is the executive director of the Pro-Life Action League, which is America's foremost grassroots pro-life activist organization. Eric is the oldest of 7 kids, and they were all born from the veteran pro-life leader, Joe Scheidler, so you might recognize his last name. And because of Eric's awesome parents, Eric's basically been communicating the pro-life message since he was very young. Matt Yonke is communications director at the Pro-Life Action League, and he helps coordinate the league's dynamic public protest activities nationwide. I got to meet both of these guys a couple of months ago, and we had dinner, and there's an immediate kinship. These guys are really, really bright. They think along the ways. It's not just about being good debaters. In fact, Eric's got this wonderful little book you can get at prolifeaction.org that talks about not just using their best arguments, but also asking questions and listening and finding common ground. And so he's been communicating a message that I'm very passionate about for a lot longer than I have been. And so I just really appreciate both these guys. They fit well on the Life Report show. Here today, we are talking about the HHS mandate and how you can be actively opposing it. And they have spearheaded something that we're going to be talking about today. But before we get to what that is, Eric, let's talk about what the HHS mandate is. I got a Facebook post on my wall today from a pro-life friend of mine who said, wait a minute, am I in a cave? What is the HHS mandate? I don't know what that is. So for the people that aren't quite as maybe have as many pro-life activist Facebook friends as you and I do, help us understand what is the HHS mandate and why should pro-life Christians be concerned about it?
Well, the HHS mandate, and first we should unpack just that term. That stands for the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services mandate. And this mandate, in a nutshell, requires all employers to provide certain services to their employees through their health plans. They require that all employees be provided with contraceptives, sterilizations, and abortion-inducing drugs through their health plans. And where does this come from? The HHS mandate comes from the Affordable Care Act, better known to many of your listeners perhaps as Obamacare, which is the health care law that was passed back in 2010 in a cloud of controversy, barely squeaked through the Senate, one of the most cynically passed pieces of legislation in the history of the Union. And the Affordable Care Act has a provision requiring that employer health plans provide preventive care. Now, whatever you may think about Obamacare, the principle of providing preventive care is a good one. It's better to screen for cancer and catch it than it is to have somebody get very sick and then have to go through very expensive chemotherapy treatments or something like that. So preventive care is a good idea, wellness checkups and such. Mm-hmm. But here they have defined for women that preventive care includes contraceptives, sterilizations, and abortion-inducing drugs, which means that a woman's natural capacity to become pregnant, her fertility, is now being treated as if it's a disease requiring mandated preventive services.
Right.
So there's a logical problem with calling these things preventive services in the first place. But there's a far more important problem to this mandate, which is that this preventive care mandate is being imposed on all employers, even religious employers who have a moral objection to these things. Anything from like a Catholic university that is in the classroom teaching the age-long teaching, the settled teaching of the Catholic Church, which is that contraceptives are morally unacceptable, while at the same time they're being required to provide contraceptives to their students and to their employees. Or perhaps that you're talking about a business franchise owner who owns a restaurant and is a faithful Christian and doesn't want to be providing abortion-inducing drugs to his employees. This mandate requires those employers to provide those services. So, and not only does it require them to contradict their own consciences, to deny their own moral values, but even worse, the HHS mandate contains within it a religious exemption, which sounds like a good thing. We should be exempting religious employers from mandates that they're opposed to. However, the religious exemption is so narrow that Jesus and his apostles would not have qualified because Jesus healed people who weren't only believing Jews. He healed the centurion's servant.
Right.
He talked to the Samaritan woman and ministered to her, and so therefore he would not have qualified for the very, very narrow religious exemption. And it's that religious exemption that really is the most alarming thing, because here we have the federal government deciding that the activities that we as Christians do because our Lord calls us to, like feeding the hungry, sheltering the homeless, educating the young, feeding the poor, that these things are no longer considered to be within the realm of religious ministry. Things we do because our Lord told us to take care of the least of these are not considered to be religious. Only activities that are focused on members of your own religious denomination, inculcating beliefs of that denomination, and employing primarily or exclusively people of that denomination will qualify. In other words, what you do on Sunday at church, that counts as religion. But when you walk out of the church doors and take care of those whom our Lord told us to take care of, you're not doing religion anymore, according to the Obama administration. And that is why the HHS mandate is such an unprecedented assault on the freedom of religion and must be opposed by all Americans who stand with our founding fathers in believing that faith has a place in our national life, and that the Congress and the federal government are not the ones to be telling us what religion really is and does.
Well said. Matt, let me ask you this. Planned Parenthood is arguing that this controversy is all about access to contraception. This is a contraception issue. What is your take on that argument?
Well, first of all, I think that goes right out the window when we realize that like Eric said, sterilizations and abortion-inducing drugs are included in this. It's not just about contraception. The second thing that you have to notice in this is that there is no crisis of access to contraception in this country. Have you been to a Walgreens lately? Have you been to your local CVS? Every corner in America has a drugstore where you can buy as many contraceptives as you like. And if that's not good enough for you, if just easy access at the drugstore isn't good enough, you can go to your Planned Parenthood, you can go to your local free clinic and get condoms handed to you by the bucketful usually.
Right.
So it's an absolute farce to claim that there's any kind of crisis of access. It's readily available.
I thought Life Training Institute made a really good point on their blog, or no, I think it was on their podcast talking about this, where they're saying, look, there's this conflicting arguments where on the one hand they're saying, look, everybody uses contraception. Even many Catholic women use contraception, like 80-90% of them, which that study's flawed, but either way, they're like 90% of Catholic women use contraception. It's like, well, then there's not an access problem. They all have access to it. How do both of these realities work? Anyway, hey, I want to read a short quote from a story that appeared on your guys' website today and have you comment on it. This is at standupforreligiousfreedom.com. And it's a story that lawsuits were filed by 43 Catholic institutions in federal court today against the Obama administration under the HHS mandate, and one of them is the University of Notre Dame. And the Notre Dame's president, Father John Jenkins, sent an email to all the university employees to kind of explain about what is going on, which I think was great. And I'm just going to read a portion of this email that went out to the staff. He says, let me say very clearly what this lawsuit is not about. It is not about preventing women from having access to contraception, nor even about preventing the government from providing such services. Many of our faculty, staff, and students, both Catholic and non-Catholic, have made conscientious decisions to use contraceptives. As we assert the right to follow our conscience, we respect their right to follow theirs. And we believe that if the government wishes to provide such services, means are available that do not compel religious organizations to serve as its agents. And then this is the best part. We do not seek to impose our religious beliefs on others. We simply ask that the government not impose its values on the university when those values conflict with our religious teachings. Eric.
Notre Dame's a good case for talking about this mandate, though, because Barack Obama and Kathleen Sebelius, his HHS secretary, herself a woman with a really shameful pro-abortion record, a self-proclaimed Catholic, they claimed to be making an accommodation back in February for religious employers, saying that they were going to sort of change things around, and now it would be the insurance company that would be paying for the contraceptives and not the employer. We immediately recognized, and I believe the Pro-Life Action League was the very first organization to come out and say so, that this was nothing but a shell game. Here's Sebelius and Obama saying, well, you're not paying for the contraceptives. It's the guy you're paying who's paying for the contraceptives, and that's not going to cut it for someone who really believes that as Christians we have an obligation to keep our hands out of being involved with any kind of evil. So the accommodation means absolutely, even if it were true, even if it were not a shell game, it doesn't apply to an institution like Notre Dame because they're self-insured. They are the insurer.
Wow.
So to say it's the insurer that's paying for it is absolutely no answer at all to Notre Dame. They are the insurer as well as the employer. So
that's
it's
interesting.
wonderful that they are pursuing this path along with dozens of other institutions and fighting the HHS mandate in court. And it has to be fought in court. It has to be fought on the editorial pages, but it also has to be fought in the public square.
Yeah, it was interesting when the pro-life response and the Catholic response was, this seems like a shell game to me. Like their response was, no, the insurance costs are not going to go up at all for you. Your bill's not going to go up, and it was like, trust us, this won't be a problem. It's like, yeah, and in a year, when everyone's charges go way up, they're not gonna think that there's any connection, right? There's gonna be no connection. There's a completely random, completely different thing. Yeah, I don't think so. Okay, both of you respond to this. Matt, we'll start with you. Exactly how does the HHS mandate violate the First Amendment?
Well, as Eric kind of pointed out earlier, I think the biggest violation is that it's trying to define what religious ministry is for us as Christians. And for people of all faiths. It's trying to say that the government has the right to pick and choose what is and isn't the practice of our faith, and trying to make healthcare something that as an institution, obviously the Catholic Church invented the hospital. That's something that has deep roots in our religious faith, and they're trying to tell us now that it has nothing to do with our religious faith. That the healthcare establishment is some kind of secular thing that we talk about completely separate from our religious faith, and that's simply not true. And we will be forced as Catholics, even an employer like the Pro-Life Action League, to violate these fundamental religious principles. That is, I'm sure you've seen the quote that's been going around that Thomas Jefferson said, that it's one of the most violent things the government can do to make a man do something against his conscience, and it's something that our government has stood against from its very earliest days, and it's scary to see how far afield we've come.
Anything you want to add, Eric?
Well, I think if we look at say an institution like Prison Fellowship, founded by the late Charles Colson, just passed away, he did not ask the prisoners that he was ministering to or what religion they were before he did Bible study with them or counseled with them or provided them with whatever they needed. He wasn't asking what religion do you belong to. And yet, according to the Obama administration, what Charles Colson was doing doesn't count as religion. Prison Fellowship wasn't a religious ministry, according to Kathleen Sebelius and Barack Obama. And that really ought to outrage all of us. I mean, for centuries, we've recognized, millennia really, we've recognized that caring for the sick and visiting prisoners and all these things that our Lord told us to do, that he exemplified with his own life and that his apostles taught us all to do down through the ages. They don't count. They don't count as religion. And we've seen this in other areas with the Obama administration. Their notion of what we would call freedom of religion has been really narrowed down or dumbed down to mere freedom of worship. Yeah, you can kind of entertain yourselves on Sunday at church. That's okay. You can do whatever you want to within the church walls, at least for now. But once you walk out of the doors of the church, you are in what Richard Newhouse called the naked public square, where faith is no longer welcome. And we have to absolutely resist this. I say amen to faith in the public square. Our founding fathers recognized the need for a vibrant faith community to instruct the people in morals, to give them the foundation that they needed. I mean, look at our Declaration of Independence. We talk about inalienable rights, right to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and that governments are founded to protect those rights. Well, how can you have inalienable rights, rights that belong to us simply because we are human beings, if the only rights we have are granted to us by a government?
Right.
The very premise of our nation is that there is a higher authority beyond just the Constitution, beyond the instruments of the government. And our founding fathers knew that religious institutions were the ones that were going to pass those founding principles on, that were going to pass that higher law on to the people so that the Constitution would fit within a context, and so that our nation would be able to thrive. And that's what's happened over the last 223 years. And, that's what's being threatened by the HHS mandate.
Yeah. Matt, what's being done to fight the HHS mandate, and where does public protest fit in?
Well, there's a lot going on. Fortunately, it's great to see how public sentiment has really been sparked by this. I haven't seen in years people as fired up about what's happening as they are right now in reaction to the mandate. There's things like the petition that's been going around at the Stop HHS site that you can sign there. There's lots of people just spreading the word on Facebook, on their own pages, telling people, alerting people to what's going on, and spreading the word that way, which isn't something you see all the time. Public policy issues like this, Health and Human Services mandates don't usually make the news, but they're everywhere. It's everywhere right now, so that's great to see too. But I don't think there's any substitute for taking to the streets, and that's what we did on March 23rd in the first Stand Up for Religious Freedom event. We had over 64,000 people in over 145 American cities, literally from Portland, Maine, out into the ocean to Honolulu, Hawaii, protesting the HHS mandate. I've certainly, in my 5 years of professional pro-life activism, never seen anything like it. It was a singular response and such a thrill to be involved in. I can't tell you, if nothing else, get out to one of these rallies for the experience of standing up for your principles, standing up for what you believe in with thousands of other people who care about the same thing. It is exhilarating and it's effective because, that's part of people taking to the streets is part of what keeps this issue hot and keeps it from fading away in the 24-hour news cycle. There's always a new story, but this story has stuck because people got out on the streets and spoke their minds about it and let the powers that be know that there is a serious reaction to this among the common American.
Okay, I'm going to ask you an admittedly leading question now. Was there an effective counter-protest?
I'll let you take that, yeah.
Sure. Well, there was an ineffective counter-protest. There was a Unite Women rally, series of rallies that attempted to bring together women and those who support them, apparently, across the country in rallies like ours. And they did get rallies going in a handful of cities, but the results were pretty dismal on the whole. I think the biggest of the rallies had a couple few hundred people, as opposed to ours, which had 2,500 in Chicago and that many in St. Paul, 1,500 in New York, and those are conservative estimates. I mean, across the country, just huge numbers. And I mean, I saw a report from Connecticut where the group that did our March 23rd rally came out to sort of counter demonstrate at the Unite Women rally, and just about outnumbered them just with an impromptu group, which was pretty stunning to see. So they don't have the grassroots, is what it boils down to. The pro-life side has been doing this since 1973. We've been bringing people out to protest because that's kind of one of our only outlets is to get out on the streets. So it was interesting to see.
It makes sense too, though. It seems to make sense that it wouldn't be that hard to get young people who survived the abortion holocaust to get out there and stand for those that are still potential victims, versus getting people excited to either protect abortion rights or fight for this idea that we should all be given free birth control pills from the government and Catholic organizations. It seems like it would be harder to get people super excited to go to a rally about that. Now, you guys decided to do another rally that's going to be on June 8th. So tell me about that. Why did you pick June 8th, and what is that rally going to be?
Well, let me kind of rewind just a little bit and go back to the first days when we first heard about this mandate, and when it became clear that it was going to be imposed on all religious employers, despite all of President Obama's promises to respect freedom of conscience. My first instinct was we need to protest this thing. And working with Monica Miller, who's another longtime pro-life activist, been involved for decades. Monica's a good, dear friend of my whole family. I remember meeting her first when I was, maybe in junior high. And she's up in Detroit with Citizens for a Pro-Life Society. Both of us immediately had the same thought: we need to protest nationally. We had collaborated on the protests at Notre Dame, so it was like coming full circle. So Monica and I got together and started talking about what we could do, and we decided that one big rally wasn't enough. We didn't want to just go to Washington, because this isn't just a Washington issue. This isn't just something for the Capitol. This is an issue that affects us all across the country. We wanted as many people as possible to be able to participate. So we called for rallies on March 23rd in Lent on a Friday, just a few days before the Feast of the Annunciation, when we remember Mary saying yes to the angel when he came to ask her to be the mother of the Lord, saying yes to fertility, saying yes to pregnancy, saying yes to motherhood. Here was Barack Obama saying motherhood's a kind of disease that needs to be prevented with mandated services. So we picked that date because of how it fit in with the sort of liturgical calendar, and to present a very contrary idea to the notion that fertility is something to always say no to. The rallies were a huge success, and what we heard again and again from people all over the country was, thanks for doing this. I felt like I was all alone, and I went out to the rally in my town. I couldn't believe how many people there were. And here in Chicago, I was hopeful that we'd have 500. That was my sort of dream. We had 2,500 that came out. As the crescendo began to build those last few days before the rally, and we started getting national coverage, and Fox News was calling and stuff, we thought, well, maybe we'll have 10,000 people. I was tentatively saying to reporters, well, I'm hopeful for 10,000. We had 63,000 plus people come out. And so in the wake of that kind of enthusiasm, hundreds and hundreds, literally hundreds of news stories, television, newspapers, online, radio, talking about this, and always, even the biased reports, always included the fact that this was a religious freedom rally. So even people who disagreed with us or didn't understand at least got the notion that somebody out there is upset that this thing seems to be trampling on their religious freedom. Maybe, I don't really understand it, but that sort of should bother most people.
Right.
People don't want that kind of controversy. So we were able to clothe the HHS mandate in a mantle of controversy and hit the reset button on the message. This is not about contraceptive access, which, as Matt pointed out, could not hardly be. It's hard to imagine a world with more contraception. This is about religious freedom, freedom of conscience. And so we wanted to build on that with another rally. And so we chose the date of June 8th, because, as you know, the Supreme Court is going to be handing down a ruling on the Affordable Care Act, on Obamacare, just a few weeks, towards the end of June. And we wanted to be preparing the ground for that ruling. So if the Supreme Court throws out Obamacare and says, you know what, this law is just unconstitutional because of other provisions that they're looking at, we want the next wave of healthcare reform, which is sorely needed in this country.
Right.
We want the next healthcare reform, next crack at it, to respect religious freedom, and maybe even do more than that. Rather than partnering with Cecile Richards at Planned Parenthood and giving her such open-door access to the White House, how about asking Cardinal Dolan to come in, and the Catholic hospitals to come in, and the Christian ministries like Prison Fellowship to come in and talk about how we can best serve the underprivileged? Don't partner with Planned Parenthood, the abortion provider. Partner with those who've been caring for the poor for thousands of years, not killing children for a few decades.
Right.
All right. June 8th, then. Why that specific date? Because on June 8th, 1789, James Madison introduced the Bill of Rights to the first Congress, meeting at that time, I believe, in New York City, which was a temporary capital. And that, of course, included the First Amendment, which says that Congress shall pass no law establishing a particular religious faith or restricting the freedom of religious institutions, which is exactly what the HHS mandate attempts to do. So we chose that date as a reminder that the Bill of Rights was a human invention. It was established by our founding fathers, and here we have the inheritors of that incredible Constitution, President Obama, serving now as the executive, trying to dismantle it. So as Americans, as patriots, as Christians, we need to be fighting this. And June 8th is the day we chose. Friday, June 8th, in over 120 cities all across the United States, people will be standing up against the HHS mandate and calling on our federal government to respect religious freedom and to invite the august legacy of Christian healthcare to be a part of healthcare reform, rather than trying to drive Christian healthcare out of the public square.
Eric, let me ask you real quick about something that I saw on your website. I just want you to explain for me. It's talking about the June 8th rally, and it says, if the Supreme Court strikes down Obamacare, the June 8th rally sets the agenda for future healthcare reform, demanding respect for religious liberty and freedom of conscience. But if the court leaves Obamacare intact, the June 8th rally advances our demand that the HHS mandate must go. Help me understand what that means. What is the next step in that fight if we lose at the Supreme Court?
Well, the fight is going to have to be carried on in multiple channels. We've already talked about the lawsuits. So there's the judicial channel, the legal channel that's being pursued now. And I can't tell you how thrilled I was to hear about all those lawsuits being filed across the country by dioceses, by universities, by hospital networks, and so forth. So that's part of the battle. And the public outcry, I think, helps that. For one thing, this kind of public display makes this issue much more notable to people, and it will help to drive the kind of funding and pro bono legal work and so forth that's needed to win these cases. The public protest feeds into the legal protest, I think, in a very important way. We want to contribute in that way. And I think it also gets the message out to judges, gets them thinking. Another aspect of this is the electoral change that may be necessary. If the Supreme Court upholds the Obamacare law, the Affordable Care Act, we can fight it in court, and we must, but a much more expedient way to deal with the problem is to vote our pro-life, our pro-religious freedom conscience on November 6th, 2012, and bring about a change in the leaders who are responsible for safeguarding our freedoms and ensuring that this kind of attack doesn't happen. So let's vote on November 6th for the kind of change that we're going to need to bring about a reversal of the HHS mandate and other provisions of the Affordable Care Act, which attack religious freedom, like the hidden abortion funding mandate that we've only just begun to realize is sort of hidden within that package. And of course, there is the public awareness angle, and that's what these protests are really about, to educate the American people broadly about this issue, so that as those court cases move forward, as the campaigns move forward, they will be sharing the truth about this mandate with their friends and their family, and helping to build that groundswell of public opinion that will cause change to happen and restore the First Amendment to its rightful place.
Matt, let's end with you. You've got 15 seconds. How can people get involved in the stand-up rally and the fight against the HHS mandate?
All right, visit standuprally.com, and you can click on the link for locations and see where there's a rally near you. If there's not one, there's a link for you to apply to be a rally captain in your city, and we'd love to hear from you and love to see you get involved in one of the over 125 rallies coast to coast.
Eric and Matt, thanks so much. You can learn more about their work at prolifeaction.org. Guys, I just appreciate you coming on this show and giving us yet another opportunity to go out and do something with our convictions. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Josh. We appreciate you too.
That's our show. Have a great week.
You've been watching Life Report, pro-life talk, real-world answers. Life Report is produced by Right to Life of Central California. Visit their website at fresnoprolife.org.